Hi guys, thank you for clicking on this video. My name's Aisha and this is Aisha Liam Talks. So today's video is going to be absolutely shocking for quite a few reasons. So in the early hours of the 19th of October 2021, a young girl, 4-year-old girl named Cleo Smith was abducted from her family tent in the Blowholes campsite in Western Australia, which was only less than an 80-kilometre drive from her hometown of Carnarvon. Cleo's abduction, it shook the entire world, and it's not hard to see why. So it's not very often that a little girl will go missing and turn up weeks later alive and well. The perpetrator of this insane crime was described as an oddball, a loner, a 36-year-old man named Terence Darrell Kelly. Now, to even begin to understand why this happened, I think we need to know a little bit more about Terence and his upbringing, because this guy is far from normal. Like, he's not okay. It's said that Terence has always struggled with his mental health. His mother was an alcoholic drug addict who didn't want him. She would put alcohol in his baby bottles, and he was said to be born with fecal alcohol syndrome, which means that his mum was drinking while she was pregnant with him. At the age of 2, he was removed from his mother's care and he was placed in the care of a member of the Indigenous community named Penny Walker. Penny Walker also lived in the town of Carnarvon, and unfortunately she died in 2020. So that would have been a year before this had happened. Now, Penny was a part of what's called the stolen generation. She had quite a traumatic upbringing herself. She was said to suffer sexual assault, beatings. She claims that she had been quite a heavy drinker in her youth, that she had been through domestic violence, and that she had had all 6 of her own children taken off of her. In later life, Penny said that she was blessed to have been given the opportunity to raise Terence. Born in 1943, Penny was 44 years of age when she took in this brown-haired, curly-haired boy she nicknamed Terry. She said during a 2019 oral history interview, "I looked down at him, this little boy. God was giving me something back to my life, my children. So I had this beautiful little boy, Terry, 2-year-old, jet black, curly hair." She said that she'd raised him alongside 2 of her grandchildren after her daughter unfortunately passed away from multiple sclerosis. It was said that Penny spoiled Terence quite a lot, and that people in the community would refer to Terence as her little princess. Terence struggled with his speech and with his hearing, and despite the social isolation that would have been caused by him not being able to hear properly, he refused to wear his hearing aids because when he did, the other kids in the school would bully him. It was also said that he grew up surrounded by violence and trauma, that he feared his 2 uncles. And by the age of 12, Terence was hospitalised for, well, he was bedwetting and he became horrendously suicidal, which put him in hospital. He winded up being expelled from schools for his disruptive behaviour, and he was beaten really badly by his dad when he went back to live with him for a short period of time in his childhood. Now, at some point, obviously, Terence would turn to drugs and he started taking methamphetamine. His mind seemed to become pretty addled and he created himself a fantasy family. And he went onto social media and he created fake profile accounts, like profiles for his fake family. He would actually post things on Facebook as these people. He would comment on his own stuff as these people, pretending to be his family. From the outside, Terence looked like a pretty normal person. Neighbours and old school friends and people have always said that they didn't notice anything particularly unusual about him, especially not in his younger years. But Terence's quite unusual behaviour seemed to be exhibited more behind closed doors. Now, Terence had a huge obsession and a huge collection of dolls. His favourite kind of doll being Bratz dolls. On social media, he called himself Bratz DeLuca, which is a name which is appropriated from Bratz dolls. And pictures that were posted following his arrest show the walls absolutely lined with all of these dolls, with his huge doll collection. Terence's cousin says that when Penny passed away, this really impacted him significantly. Now, I can understand why this would. I mean, he was alone. He had no family. The only person he had was this Penny. I mean, he had a couple of like long cut cousins or whatever, or maybe some people that he called family or friends, but he didn't really have that many people. The cousin said they were very close. She was the only thing he had. Eventually she passed away, and I think that shattered him, and he was lonely. His behaviour changed. He just kept locking himself in the house. Now, Terence seemed to just be in this little world of his own, in his own little bubble. He was so lonely that, as I say, he created himself this imaginary family, and despite posting as this family himself, he genuinely believed that they were real. All this guy really wanted was a family and a little girl that he could call his own. So when Terence turned up at the Blowholes campsite at some point between 2:30 and 3 o'clock on the 19th of October, he was looking for something to steal so that he could go and sell it. But he came across a little tricycle sat outside one of the tents. When he saw this tricycle, he had an idea. And this idea would lead to the nation's biggest search and rescue operation there has ever been. And it would leave a family in complete and utter despair. 4-year-old Cleo Smith and her family were fast asleep in that terrible moment that would change the course of their lives forever. Cleo's mother, Ellie Smith, and her stepfather, Jake Giddon, have grown up around the Blowholes and have been fishing there and diving there their entire lives. They'd been there many times before, and it was the perfect place for a family getaway, somewhere close to home, where obviously it was during COVID lockdown, so somewhere they didn't have to go and cross over the borders or anything like that, and they could just go and have this little family getaway. This was the first holiday that they'd managed to go on since Ellie had given birth to Cleo's sister, Isla, on the 3rd of March 2021, and Cleo had been so excited to go on this holiday. She would obviously have remembered going there in the past, and it would have been very exciting for her. The ground around the campsite was all quite hard, so it was like the perfect terrain for Cleo to be able to ride her tricycle up and down while the parents got the camp ready. Once the camp was all set up, they set a fire, they got marshmallows out, they were like roasty toasty marshmallows by the fire, you know, they were just having a good time. At 7 p.m. on the 18th of October, which was the first day of their holiday, Cleo said to her mum that she was feeling tired. So her mum went and tucked her into her little sleeping bag on her little blow-up mattress, which was right next to her baby sister's cot. And she went off to go and sit with Jake and go and admire the stars. A few hours later, Ellie and Jake went to bed in their queen-size mattress, which was in the next compartment, literally less than a metre away from the children. The night was quite a windy one, you know, just the general sounds of the seaside, the rustling and the rattling from the shacks, the rustling of the tents. It all would have made for quite a noisy night's sleep. At 1:30 in the morning, Ellie got woken up to Cleo. She was asking her mum for a cup of water, saying that she was thirsty. So Ellie went and got her a glass of water, tucked her back into bed, checked on her a few minutes later, said goodnight and went back to sleep. But when Ellie and Jake would wake up at 6 o'clock the following morning, now that's when their nightmare would begin. Ellie was the first person up and out of bed. She had got up to prepare Isla's bottle. So she got up, she stepped through the divider, and the first thing that she would have noticed was that the tent door was wide open. Obviously she'd closed it before she'd gone to bed. The tent door was wide open, and her very first instincts, check on the kids. She checks on the kids and she sees that Cleo's missing. Not only was Cleo missing, but so was her sleeping bag, just all of it, everything gone. Now, at this point, Ellie was absolutely gripped with fear. She screams out for Jake, help, help, Cleo's gone. Jake is completely shocked. He doesn't know what to do. He's just in shock, like, what? And she shouts out to him again, Cleo's gone, we need to find her. And he jumps straight out of bed. He starts searching around the floor. He checks outside to see if there's any signs of like footprints or anything like this, but he couldn't see any signs of like a struggle in the floor. He couldn't see any drag marks, no footprints, no nothing. So they began searching They searched that campsite from top to bottom, calling out Cleo's name. They woke up so many other people. Other people began looking too. Now, obviously, they know this area very well. They've been growing up here their entire lives. They've been visiting this campsite for their whole lives. So it doesn't take very long for them to search this campsite from top to bottom, and they still can't find her. So they then strap Isla into her car seat and they go all along the coastline. They stop every single person that they can see. They jump out the car, they go check the beaches, they check everywhere they can possibly think of looking for their little girl. But unfortunately, a little while later, they end up having to return to their tent, unable to find their daughter or her sleeping bag. Ellie said in an interview, "It felt like my heart. It told me, she's not here. She's not going to run into my arms today. She's not going to run down a sand dune. She was basically nowhere near me. And that was the second I realised someone had her. I don't think words could really describe how I felt in that moment. It was nothing that I ever want anyone to feel. I didn't know when my baby was, and while saying that, I also knew someone had taken her." At 6:23, Ellie made a call to 000 and explained to the police that her daughter was missing. A car was then dispatched within 7 minutes of this phone call, and the car arrived at 10 minutes past 7. Another car then arrived 9 minutes later, and it was at this point that the manhunt for Cleo began. To begin with, the case was being treated primarily as a search and rescue case. Police conducted an air, sea and land search for the rest of the day. They deployed horses, cars, motorbikes, helicopters, drones, everything to look for this little girl. But Ellie and Jake were adamant from the very beginning that Cleo, this little girl that was, afraid of the dark, there was no way that she was going to have left the tent by herself, that she was going to have left them. She said again in an interview, she would never leave us. She would never leave the tent. And as a parent, I mean, you'd probably know, wouldn't you? Your child is not going to leave you. I mean, I've been camping with my son, and there's no way he'd disappear from the tent. I know that. After a thorough search of the area, the police did come to the conclusion that Cleo wasn't there, and they also came to the conclusion that she wouldn't have been able to open the tent anyway. So, the tent, the way that the tent was, the zip was too high that she wouldn't have even been able to reach it anyway. So there was no way that she could have gotten out of that tent by herself. It was the position of this zipper that sparked concerns for the police, and the investigation changed from a search and rescue to an abduction case. The police then began the painstaking task of interviewing everybody that was at the campsite that night, of obtaining all of the CCTV from the area. They went through satellite data, they went through phone data. They even searched through 17 tons of rubbish and garbage that they had collected from over 600 kilometres worth of highway. The police didn't rule out the possibility that Cleo had been taken out of state, but due to the quite strict border conditions that were in place at the time because of the COVID pandemic, they said that crossing the border would have been quite unlikely. So they were trying to concentrate their search, within that state, within like the blowholes and the Carnarvon area. Everybody that could help out was helping out and looking for Cleo. But the statistics in cases like this are quite grim, Typically, in crimes like this, where a stranger takes a child, that child is generally killed within 6 hours of the abduction. The police instructed the family to leave the search to the professionals and to just stay put. So the family just remained at the campsite and hoped and prayed that their little girl would be located. Ellie said, "That whole time I just felt powerless. Everything inside your body is saying, get in the car, go here, go there, look, ask everyone you know. Have you seen her? This is her." But you can't. Ellie and Jake described being unable to sleep, being terrified, and just sitting, staring at the same empty space at the blowholes, just hoping that she'll come back. And every single day they just be sat there feeling completely empty and hopeless and powerless. They stayed at that place that caused them so much pain, just hoping that their daughter would be returned. Unable to do anything else, 24 hours later, Ellie would go and post on Facebook. She would share the trauma that her family was going through and beg and plead for anyone to help, for any information, begging for her daughter to be returned to her. The word spread really quickly and the news of Cleo's abduction began popping up on news all over the place. Within days of Cleo's disappearance, the police offered a $1 million reward.
We're going to offer a $1 million reward to anyone who provides information that leads to us finding Cleo. So the police are very keen to offer this reward to hopefully allow for us to discover the location of Cleo as soon as possible. And I just urge anyone who has any knowledge of the location of Cleo, please provide that information to police.
This would entice a lot of bounty hunters to the area, so everyone was out there looking for her, but still no one could find her. Ellie said, "We were trying to hold out hope that she'd just wandered off, and we knew the moment that we left the campsite we wouldn't see anyone looking for her." 6 days after Cleo's disappearance, the police withdrew their efforts from the Blowhole's campsite and they began looking at other leads. The police had found a footprint and traces of DNA inside the family's tent. They also had reports of a car screeching away from the campsite at close to 3 a.m. that night. This was corroborated by another driver who saw a sedan leaving the Blowhole's campsite and heading off towards Carnarvon. When the police left the campsite, Ellie, Jake and Isla, they had no choice but to pack up and leave the campsite too. They would now have to put their faith into the homicide squad as they continued their investigation. Leaving the campsite was absolutely heartbreaking for Ellie and Jake because it was like saying a heart-wrenching goodbye to Cleo. Western Australia Deputy Police Commissioner Cole Blanche said that it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The police methodically checked the whereabouts of any registered sex offenders in the area at the time, which was over 20 people. They went through hundreds of thousands of pieces of evidence and testimony, and they also followed up on over 200 leads. The police also searched the family home. Of course, Ellie and Jake, they had nothing to do with this, so they were more than happy to give the police anything they wanted. But having the police at their home sparked rumours in the community, which then spread wider, that they had something to do with their daughter's disappearance. And people would begin sending them some really, really horrific and hateful messages. Jake said, "Having the police on your property, it created a picture, I think, for some people. Aha, now you know they're onto someone, and it's the family." Ellie said, "Yeah, all we were trying to do was help them, and people would be like, oh yeah, they know something, they know it's them. Really, we were giving them our keys, we were helping them." They began getting tons of messages accusing them of doing something to their daughter, saying things like, "Go kill yourself." And, you know, having messages like this come to you all the time when you're already in such a dark and horrifying place as it is, that must have been absolutely terrible. Ellie said, you know, people, they just had so much hate in their hearts that they would message parents that have had their child taken, saying things like, telling them, "You've done this, go kill yourself," to go tell the police that you know the truth. They have no idea who we are as people or any of the situation at all, but yet they had the audacity to message us and accuse us of something that they had no idea about. It's so disgusting. It just kept confirming that there are such terrible people in the world that they would write these messages, let alone take my child. As the days turned into weeks, Cleo's chances of survival were seriously dwindling and the family were getting desperate. On the 30th of October 2021, 11 days following Cleo's disappearance, Ellie posted on Facebook, "Every day is getting hard without my bright shining light. Today she missed Halloween with her family. She needs us and we need her. I need my baby girl home. Please, I beg you." Little did she know at the time, but Terence Kelly, the guy who actually abducted her daughter, had followed her on social media and was reading the things that she was writing. On the 2nd of November 2021, the police found the final piece of the puzzle and they located Terence. They stationed police officers outside his home in Carnarvon, literally only a 2-minute drive away from the family home, and they waited for him to leave. A little after midnight, Terence left the house. They arrested him and they took off his door and they searched his home. To the absolute amazement of everyone, Cleo was found locked away in an upstairs bedroom, alive and well.
I've got her. Hey, Bobby.
Bring the camera in.
Hey, Bobby, come here. Come here. I've got you, Bobby.
What's your name?
You're alright.
What's your name? What's your name, sweetheart?
My name is Cleo.
Your name is
You're alright,
Cleo.
Bobby.
Hello, Cleo.
You can hear the emotion in the officer's voice when they are asking her what her name is. But now that they found her, they needed to get her straight to the hospital and contact her parents. Ellie and Jake were fast asleep when they got that phone call. Ellie woke up and looked at her phone and she just stared at it, looking at it, terrified, because it was obvious that this was either going to be good news or this was going to be bad news. But either way, she had to answer that phone call. She answered the phone and the officer on the other end of the line said to her, "I've got someone here who wants to speak to you." Cleo got on the phone and said, "Hi, Mummy." At this point, Ellie is just like overwhelmed, smacking Jake, like, "Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up." She was completely unable to contain her emotions. I mean, I can't imagine how she must have felt in that moment, you know. She's on the phone, her daughter's there, and she's just, "Hi, baby, oh my God." I would, yeah. Oh, that must have been an overwhelming moment for her, for sure. Their precious little girl had just been found, hidden in plain sight, only minutes away from their home. Ellie and Jake immediately rushed to the hospital, where they had to press a button and wait outside because of all the COVID stuff. But as soon as they got in, they got on that ward, they saw her sat on that bed, wide smile, looking like nothing had happened. You know, they ran straight over to her, cuddled her in, were crying, were absolutely overjoyed to have their daughter back. They would not have wanted to let go. The family were finally back together. But what actually happened in those 18 days that she was missing? Well, only Terence and Cleo really know everything, but Terence has told us a few things and Cleo has also said a few things, so we know a little bit. So to begin with, when Terence got Cleo back home, he had to amend one of the bedroom doors so that he could keep it locked from the outside, so that he could lock her in. Her hair had been cut and dyed pink. According to Cleo, he'd cut and dyed her hair more than once. She said that he'd taken her necklace off of her and she could hear a dog barking in the garden, which the neighbours would then confirm that that was his dog that she could hear, because he'd locked his dog in the garden for that whole time. In his police interview, Terence confessed to roughing up the girl a few times for being bossy and for asking for chocolate. But fortunately, when she was found by the police, she was found unharmed. Terence also said that he'd tried to bind her hands and her feet and her mouth with sticky tape, that he tried to bind her to a chair with sticky tape, but he said that his efforts were unsuccessful because he said that she was a bit of a fighter. Cleo would often cry in the bedroom, and Terence said that he would turn the bathroom radio on and turn it up to try and drown out her cries. Now, while this radio was on, obviously they're searching for her, and she could hear her name being said on the radio. And she asked him about this. She asked him, why can I hear my name? Like, I can hear my name on the radio. I just want my parents, you know. She begged him to go home. Terence would regularly leave Cleo at home on her own, presumably locked away in that little room. He'd been seen out of the house multiple times. He'd been visiting his family, he'd been to the shops, he'd been to an arts and craft fair even, and he had been spotted actually buying nappies. On the night that Cleo was found, he'd left her at home on her own at gone midnight, awake, playing with toy cars. Nobody knows exactly what his intentions were with Cleo, what he wanted to do with her, but he did claim that he never actually intended to keep her. That's about all we know about what happened while he had her. Obviously, nobody really wants to make Cleo relive the experience, and he's only told so much. The day after Cleo was reunited with her family shared a video which shows the girl's joy and, you know, happiness at being back home with her family. But Ellie and Jake have said that they have noticed a change in her. Ellie said, "It was probably like 7 a.m, so that was only 6 hours after we got back. She was jumping around and, you know, dancing, singing. She was so happy. That was just Yeah, it was such a beautiful moment just to see her as the old Cleo. But you could still see, like for us, we've seen her do it a million times before and now a million times after, and it's still different. She's still different, and she always will be. That's just our life now. Cleo's mental health has been quite significantly impacted by this abduction. Ellie said that the first week was the worst, and then like the first night they all had to sleep in the same room together, and that she had to have all the lights on, all the doors open, or she wouldn't be able to sleep. And even when she did fall asleep, she would wake up screaming, having horrendous nightmares. Ellie said it was nightmare after nightmare after being through the nightmare. She said her emotions are very up and down. She was very angry. She would lash out a lot of the time. She never really understood her feelings during her healing process. That's kind of what we're doing, helping her understand. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be happy. We're just helping her along the way of her journey now. On Wednesday, the 5th of April, 2023, Terence was sentenced to 13.5 years in prison for forcibly taking a child under the age of 16. His sentence was backdated to his arrest in November 2021, and he will be eligible for parole after serving 11.5 years. That means that he will be 48. Cleo's parents had to sit through the court case and listen to everything that happened to their daughter. A psychiatric report read out in court said that Terence had felt euphoria when he took the child because he could fulfill his fantasy of having a little girl to play with, to dress up, and just to be with. His diagnoses are quite long, so I am going to read them from the laptop. He was diagnosed a paranoid schizophrenic with significant borderline and narcissistic traits, complex PTSD, depression, anxiety, and possible fetal alcohol syndrome. Judge Wager said that Terence had created himself a fantasy family, that he had created multiple Facebook profiles for his fantasy family, when in reality he lived a very lonely and isolated life. She said to Terence in the courtroom, "You speak in your interview with police about having a number of children. These family members are fictitious, however they are very real to you. You also had a significant interest in Bratz dolls and owned many of them, and this hobby is consistent with your fantasy family life." Judge Wager said in sentencing that she accepted that he wanted a child of his own, but that it was drugs and not delusion that caused him to go and take one. She said, "But for the use of illicit drugs impacting on your complex personality dysfunction and neurodevelopmental issues, you would have been far less likely to ever have stolen a child." The judge described the fear and the trauma that Cleo and her family had to endure as immeasurable, saying, 18 days without contact or explanation, and with hours totally on her own, with no access to the outside world, would have been very traumatic. In the world of a 4-year-old, 1 day is a very long time. 18 days is a very, very long time indeed. Following the sentencing, the judge said, "He has gone from the euphoria of fulfilling his idealised fantasy of having a little girl that he can dress up, play with, and be with, to a harsh new reality." Now, I do have to question this a bit, right? Was it drugs or was it delusion? I think it's a bit of both. And considering this guy's history, considering his background, I don't think he should be going to prison. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think he should be locked up. He should be locked up, but I don't think he should be locked up in a prison. I think he should be locked up in a psychiatric facility. I really don't think he should be in prison. I don't understand, like, yeah, because he was taking drugs, I understand that, but like, look at his history, look at his background. Like, putting him in prison is just going to make him worse, if you ask me, personally. That's what I think. I mean, what do you guys think? You tell me. I also heard somewhere that the family are thinking about changing Cleo's name, which again, I can really understand why they would want to do that. You know, everybody's going to know her name now, considering how widespread this was. And they also did an interview for 60 Minutes Australia, which is on YouTube. So for her to be able to grow up with a normal life, they might have to do that. I can completely understand why they'd want to change the name. But now that the case is over, I really hope that they are able to put all of this horrific trauma behind them and move on with their lives. They've said that they intend to go travelling, so they're going to go and buy a caravan, they're going to sell the house, and they're going to move and travel around Australia, which I think is a really, really nice idea. And here are a few quick cute clips before we end the story.
E-F-E-O. Cleo. Yeah, Bobby, you can have this. It's her picture.
Cleo, what are you doing?
Painting fingernails.
Whose fingernails are you painting?
Daddy!
That looks really beautiful, baby.
Do you put scotch? No.
Thank you for watching this video. If you're new and you don't know what I do, I tell hardship stories. So I tell celebrity stories, everyday people stories. I tell stories that I find in the news. So if you have a story that you'd like me to share or something that you want me to talk about, you can contact me via my email or my Facebook, which I will leave linked in the description box down below. Otherwise, please subscribe and like this video. It is a free and easy way that you can support this channel. And until next time, remember to look after yourselves and be kind to everybody around you, because you never know what someone else might be going through, and a little bit of kindness and compassion can go a long way. Bye bye for now.